Hello and welcome to another video review. This is the Blackwell Legacy for PC. This is a point-and-click adventure and the first game in the Blackwell series. It was released in 2006 by Wadjet Eye Games and to a pretty decent amount of acclaim. People generally like this quite a lot, especially when you combine it with the rest of the series. And that's actually how I got this. I got the Blackwell bundle on GOG when it was on sale for a really low price. So keep that in mind when I get to a certain issue later on in this review. But also keep in mind that point-and-click adventure games are one of my favorite genres. I absolutely love this particular genre. Even a lot of the crappy ones I kind of like. So you have to keep that in mind when you're watching this thing. This is kind of my genre. So how does this stack up to some of my favorite games in the genre? Is it a worthy successor to that sort of thing? Is it a nice revival of the genre? Because we're seeing that a lot more lately. The point-and-click adventure game is starting to get back into a nice swing of things. So, is this a good example of a game that is resurrecting the point-and-click adventure game genre very well, or is it just kind of there? As far as the presentation goes, they did a good job overall, but the visuals have their own inherent problems being pixel art. And that is to say that certain objects, it's hard to tell at first glance what they actually are until you actually hover over them and it tells you what they are. So that's really the only problem I had with the visuals, though. The animations are generally well done, the sprites themselves are very well detailed, and the environments are just packed with detail. And they just did a really good job with this art style where it's sort of cartoony, but the portraits aren't. And so it actually ends up being this very visually appealing art style that really just fits the game very well. And it kind of hovers between this semi-grim and semi-upbeat kind of feel in terms of visuals. So, again, it really fits the game very well. And then there's the voice acting, which is generally pretty decent. You can tell because it was the first game there were a few issues here and there where people weren't really experienced with voice acting per se. And so certain lines are delivered kind of bored in tone and such like that. So that is a bit of an issue, but generally it's not that big a deal. Generally the characters are well voiced. They convey sarcasm when they're making sarcastic comments and stuff like that. So it doesn't sound like they're reading a script. It's just certain lines are read kind of dully, and that's not that big of a deal though. Something to note also, there are actually two versions of this game. The original release had a different voice actress for Rosangela, and the current release has Rebecca Whitaker, who actually plays Rosangela in the later games in the series. So that's just something that you should note about that particular game. Because if you have the original version of this game, then the voice actress is different. So this was re-released for a couple of reasons, one of them being consistency. So the voice acting is generally good. The music is also generally well done. But it's just something that, while it is kind of loud, it's sometimes you don't really notice it. You're really paying way more attention to what's actually going on in the game and the voice acting and such like that than you are to the music. But it is generally well done. So it does actually fit the game very well. And there is one slight issue with the music, though, and that is that it's often a bit too loud. It almost drowns out what the characters are actually saying, so there's no way, to my knowledge, to actually turn the music down. So that's a bit of an issue. I would prefer if they actually put in like a music volume slider, but again, not that huge of a deal because it does actually have subtitles. So that is very handy. But really, it's not the presentation that is going to draw you to this game. Now, what really mattered to you are the story and the gameplay, and I'm actually going to break my normal form here and talk about the gameplay first, because there's really not that much to talk about. It is a pretty typical point-and-click adventure, which means most of what you're doing is actually talking to people or looking around in the environment for objects you can interact with or look at. You right-click in order to look at things, you left-click in order to interact with them, and you can actually use objects from your inventory sometimes with objects in the world, and that'll do things. Sometimes you'll have to look at objects in your inventory to actually get further clues and such like that. You have a notebook that you'll be able to combine clues in, as well as ask people about things that you've written down. And most of the game is spent doing either dialogue with those notes and such, or actually going around and trying to find objects that you can use to get more clues and stuff like that. And that's kind of it. There really aren't that many puzzles in this game, unlike some other adventure games, and it becomes very obvious that the gameplay is not the strong focus of this game. Partly because I beat the game in about an hour and a half. Yeah, it's that easy. It's really that short and that easy. And so this probably sounds like a terrible thing. It's actually not, because the real focus of this game is the story and the characters. And it's really more about the overarching story than it is about the specific case that you're going over. To give you a bit of backstory, the game opens with Rosangela Blackwell scattering her Aunt Lauren's ashes into the river in New York City, and she goes home to find that the workers are on strike, so she can't actually get into her apartment. So she's all stressed out about that. When she finally gets home, she finds that the newspaper that she writes for, she writes movie reviews basically, and the newspaper, since everybody else is covering other things, they want her to go into the university and actually cover this the story of this girl who committed suicide over there for apparently no reason at all. And so she goes over there, she does her thing, and she comes back, and the headaches have been getting worse. She's had headaches all day, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, she just passes out in the middle of her apartment, wakes up to find Joey Malone there. And Joey Malone's a ghost. So this is a bit of a shock, in case that wasn't obvious to begin with. Turns out that Rosangela is a medium, and so was her Aunt Lauren. And so was her grandmother, actually. And what mediums do is help wayward spirits to get onto the next world. And whether they want to or not, they have to do it. Otherwise, basically, they go insane, which is kind of what happened to her aunt. She went insane and ended up in a mental institution. And so the one coherent thing they could get out of her there was that she would say Joey all the time. And so when you finally meet Joey, Rose is all freaking out about how, oh, she's probably gone insane and stuff like that. And so it actually comes across as very genuine. And the really cool thing about this game, the characters are pretty believable. And so you actually go through the whole game actually feeling for these characters and understanding where things go wrong and such like that. The problem I had with this particular game was that the story itself for this game, this particular case, was not all that interesting. What is interesting is the concept of this medium helping spirits onto the next world and such like that, and having to investigate how they died and how to help them realize that they're dead and stuff like that. It's really more the meta story, if that makes any sense, than the specific case of this game. It is a great starting point for the series, and it's one of those games where you play it and you want to know more. You want to go into the next game and see how things develop. You want to see how these characters develop along the way, because you can just see that they're just well-written characters, and you just want to know more about them. They have interesting backstories that you don't really get in the first game. You get hints at them, but you don't get their full story, and you just want to know more and such like that. And so it's an interesting starting point for the series, and I can see where a lot of people might be put off by it, because it is so short and so easy. But like I said, the real focus of this game is the story and the characters. And that's something that adventure games actually do very well. They're almost purposefully weak on the gameplay department in order to have these engrossing stories and characters. That was one thing that, say, Gabriel Knight really did very well. It was just wonderfully written. And the gameplay suffered a bit for it, sure, but still, it's really the story that propels a lot of these games. And this game really does harken back to the good old days. So it does have that major issue of being so short and so easy, but that really doesn't matter in the long run. When you play this thing, you never really feel like it's so easy that it's boring. You're really more engrossed in the characters and the storyline than anything else, and that's what you have to judge it on. And so the problem with the particular story of this game, though, is that the specific case you're on just isn't all that great. And you can see the potential for where it would be much better later on in the series when you actually learn more about characters and such like that. But as a springboard for the rest of the series, they did a really good job with this thing, and it's one of those things where I want to see what happens with the further games in the series. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.